Hey, I thought I'd do a quick overview slash mini review for AeternoBlade II. I was given this key by the developer. So far, I think this game shows a lot of promise. It actually has some very interesting, new mechanics, and the puzzles are actually quite good. And that means a lot coming from me because I don't care for puzzles in any game, really. I'll play like a game that has exclusively puzzles, like Puzzle Fighter or something. But generally, in a fighting game or an action game, I don't really prefer to have puzzles that much because they break up the pacing. Here, they are actually quite interesting. But the problem is actually the opposite. In most action games, you have puzzles like DMC4s, gyro blades, and stuff like that that really get on your nerves. They overstay their welcome and they break up the action far too much. Here, the combat is actually what needs far more work than the puzzles. The puzzles are actually quite interesting and innovative. So let's go over a quick overview. You control your character with the analog stick in this game because the D-pad is mapped to your items. So the combat's pretty standard stuff. You have a light attack, hard attack, you have a launcher. Very much like DMC, you have a ground one and you have a rising high time. And Helm Breaker is pretty much usually mapped to the launcher button in the air. You also have a dodge. The dodge actually has a pretty significant cooldown. I think that is one of the many aspects of the combat that feel a bit off. Sometimes you get in situations where you just don't have anything on cooldown and it feels like you take almost guaranteed damage. Now the moveset is actually quite expansive. But they don't tell you what any of these ranks do, and I think that's something that should be expanded on later on. It's also a relic system. I've unlocked a few, but I'm not exactly sure how to equip them. But it seems like it's mostly just stats and things like that. Now you actually switch through between three characters in this game, so you actually have quite a bit of variety there, and some of them have different abilities and things like that. But unfortunately, it's making me play as this guy now, and I can't actually show you the time mechanic. So let's just show some base combat. You guys can see exactly what's wrong with it. I think this game actually looks quite nice for an indie game, but unfortunately the performance definitely suffers because of it. It runs uncapped in both handheld and dock mode, so you never really get a very stable 60 FPS on the Switch. So right here you can see the main problem with the combat is you hit these guys and they don't stagger. Also, canceling into attacks feels very off. Like if I try to do like rising high time, I very rarely have the right momentum. And if I try to cancel into a Helm Breaker, which is like, character action game number 101, it doesn't quite work. So you're encouraged to hit things into the air, but because there's very little feedback on your attacks and the enemies don't react to that much, it feels very awkward. It's also a witch time mechanic. If you dodge an attack, pretty much like any other witch time mechanic, you get that. But the duration on it is quite short, so it doesn't feel as useful as it could be. I think the way to fix this game would be quite enjoyable if you simply had more responsiveness on your character. Like if you could cancel things faster, and canceling at the moves actually gave you the freedom that you would expect from this type of game. And it's definitely nothing that couldn't be fixed with patches. Like, see, it's right here, it's running at 60 FPS, but generally when you're in any kind of actual battle, it will run much slower. I know the developers have been
This war cannot stop me.
Developers have been pretty open about patching the game. I know that they said that they wanted to add an easy mode because the game is actually quite difficult. But unfortunately, I feel like a lot of that comes from just the unresponsiveness and the stiffness of the combat. But I guess they want more people to be able to, finish the game, which is a good thing. But I hope that patch will actually add some more responsiveness to the gameplay. Like, you can hear me mashing the R2 button, trying to get him to launch, and he doesn't do it. I've definitely played games like Corridor of Time that were kind of stiff and unresponsive like this that were fixed with patches, so I hope that's something that will happen here. I definitely would like to put more time into this game, but it feels like one of those games where it's going to be improved significantly over time. And it's not really something you want to rush through. Kind of reminds me of Indivisible, actually. That game is going to be getting a lot of updates as well, and I kind of regret finishing it as quickly as I did. Also, your momentum on your launchers is very awkward as well. You fall quite quickly, and the enemies kind of fall quickly as well, so it seems very awkward to do, like, basic combo like this. There's no jump cancel either. I think just adding more cancel windows, like I said, would go a long way towards making this a lot more enjoyable. The boss battles are actually quite challenging. They're kind of different from other boss battles in these games. You don't just hit them until they die, which I think is kind of one of the game's downfalls, is you're not really given any hints in terms of how you're supposed to do more damage to them. So a lot of times you'll be doing like literal pixels and then you find the weak spot and things go a lot faster. But it definitely feels a little bit off because there's not much of a big punish in this game. You kind of just hit the weak spot and you do way more damage than intended. But the time mechanic is actually very unique. You use it both in combat and in puzzles as well. So I think that's definitely this game's biggest selling point, is that the time mechanic is actually quite unique. And it definitely adds a new dynamic to this kind of genre of game. But unfortunately, the combat is very stiff and unresponsive. And I think until that's fixed, I can't entirely recommend it. It's definitely not a bad game at all. I think for an indie game, I think this is actually very, very ambitious. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like they put too much time or QA testing or focus testing into the combat. So I'll probably be revisiting this more once they add more maybe responsiveness to the combat and things like that. I know there's supposed to be a patch coming up soon, so I think that will possibly fix the performance a little bit. It will add an easy mode, and then hopefully they'll fix some of the other aspects of the game as well. Anyway, thanks to PQube for the key. I'll probably be playing this more casually as I get a little bit more time. Obviously, this week is pretty bonkers with releases and things like that, so I'll definitely get back to you guys when or if this game is updated. Thanks for watching. Peace.